Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the House Committee on General and Housing. And it is April 9th. And we have one more matter to hear. We yesterday commenced the process of holding hearings on federal funding cuts and their implications. Today, we're going to take testimony from Michael Monte, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Champlain Housing Trust. Michael, when you speak to us, you may want to, you've spoken to us once before, right?
I have, yes.
Yeah. I think whatever you want to say, but one thing you might make clear again to the committee is the function of CHT within the housing establishment. But why don't you introduce yourself and take it away?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. I know you're busy, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you all and to talk about the potential impacts of federal funding, both on CHT and housing in general. CHT is one of 5 NeighborWorks organizations who operate throughout the state of Vermont. We cover the state of Vermont, but certainly there are a few other nonprofits that we work with closely, as well as with the funding sources. Many who spoke yesterday about what they see as potential impacts. We work in Northwest Vermont, and we tend to be a little larger than the rest of the nonprofits, but also have some larger challenges in terms of both population and in terms of need. But more or less, what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is that, like you, we are struck with the breadth and the potential impacts of the federal policy, spending, and tax reform actions that are happening right now in Congress. And I appreciate and I can understand how difficult it is for how the state can intervene and prevent the worst from happening, and that you're thinking through these issues early on. You heard from our funding partners yesterday and how they are preparing and what they think of the changes that are coming up. I'm going to highlight a couple of things that I know as nonprofits we work directly with, in addition to the funding partners who we work with now. I just got back from DC from a meeting with a meeting from executives from NeighborWorks organizations all over the country, about 190 or so, meeting with everyone up on the Hill to talk about the importance of NeighborWorks and the works that we do in our various communities. I was with 4 other NeighborWorks organizations representing like I indicated, the whole state of Vermont and the programs that we provide. Our delegation, well, let me say that the tenure was a little grim. We discussed the potential impacts of CDBG and the home program with them, and if the fact that these programs are not cut, that they may have new priorities and guidance that may be at odds with state of Vermont's programs and policies. We also learned that congressionally directed spending may be and likely will be impacted, and congressionally directed spending has had an impact throughout the state very positively. And in Burlington, we're building a new veteran center and housing for veterans right now in downtown with congressionally directed spending from a couple of years ago. But 2025 CSDs have been suspended, and the notion that they may continue, that does not look good, but that has been a very positive impact throughout the state. I want to focus though if I can, on NeighborWorks specifically. President Trump.
Michael, just one question, if I might interrupt. You say that when you say the 2025 CSDs have been suspended, do you mean work in progress or just the commitment of the funds?
The 23 and 24 CSDs have all been committed, and those seem to be going through okay. We have some of those, and although for a fairly shaky start at the beginning of the Trump administration, at this point we don't see any problems with those funds being interrupted. As anything, things could change, but right now we're feeling okay about the money and the property and the projects that we have in the pipeline. This was funds that folks had requested for to be included in the fiscal year 25, which they just did the congressional, the budget was simply a budget continuation. And as a result, no congressional directly spending was included in that. the conversations with the congressional delegation is, will there be the CSD's congressionally directed spending up into the fiscal 26 budget? And that didn't look likely, although let me just say that these spending directed spending from the congressional delegation is very, very popular in DC, or has been very popular in DC. But we could see in the news today, budget hawks on the House side are looking for more cuts in order to balance the budget. So we don't know where things are going to land on those resources. Those have been really, really good for most of the state in a variety of programs, and not just in housing, but in healthcare and a variety of other programmatic response that the delegation has been very good in supporting. So nothing is suspended right now. We're just looking for the future again. So let me just, if I could continue on the NeighborWorks funding. President Trump tried unsuccessfully to eliminate NeighborWorks the last time he was president. So we feel that that's an imminent risk. Perhaps certainly not this year. It's been continued. It still could be cut by him, even though it's in a continuing resolution. Still could be cut by him. He might have to ask Congress about that, but he still might make that request. We're feeling okay about where we are in fiscal year 25. Fiscal year 26 is at risk. Like I said, he did recommend zero funding last time, and we were only able to overturn that even though both sides of the House were Republicans, because we had Senator Leahy, whose seniority in Congress has boosted NeighborWorks for at least a decade, and was certainly both the chair and sort of the minority in many of the most important Senate chairs that deal with appropriations. So we felt protected by Senator Leahy. He's gone. Our congressional delegation doesn't quite have that authority and power yet. So we're feeling very, very unsure about the future funding of NeighborWorks. We forward to you some handouts that we provided our congressional delegation. It's important to note that many of those projects are going forward with the support of many past and federal resources, which are limited and no longer available. But the direct funding from NeighborWorks to Vermont organizations, about $1.9 million, underwrites a network of organizations covering the state that is a critical piece of the state's housing delivery system. We provide the support for VHIP, for real estate development and management, for many of the tax credit projects that are happening throughout the state, home buyer education, home ownership through shared equity, a whole range of programs. And that 1.9 million goes for both capital, but also for operating support. So it's critical for the state, and it has been used during emergency times, through COVID and through other times, as the system that can respond to state needs when necessary. Just as a
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir,
Go ahead.
yeah, thank you, sir. You said 1.9 million.
Yes.
That was part of the congressional directed spending that to NeighborWorks goes to Champlain Housing Trust.
No, so my apologies, and I'm speaking too fast. The $1.9 million is not congressionally directed spending. The NeighborWorks funds that come to the state of Vermont through the 5 nonprofit organizations in the state of Vermont is a totals $1.9 million. We're a portion of that, as is Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, the group in Rutland, Northeast Kingdom, Central Vermont, throughout the state of Vermont, essentially. That is distributed in different ways throughout the 5 organizations. And that we use that for both a small amount for administrative funds, but also for capital activities. Many of the projects in that portfolio of projects that we gave the delegation has some portion of NeighborWorks funds in it. And that 1.9 million is reoccurring more or less every year. It goes up and down depending upon different resources that the NeighborWorks might have, but for the most part, that's been consistent funding. And the network, as a result, has been consistent in its ability to respond to the range of housing needs throughout the state, but also my point at the end here was, especially in terms of times of emergencies such as floods or even during COVID. So the VHIP program as an example, when that program was developed, this folks from the state immediately called the NAWRCS network, the 5 organizations, to help distribute those funds, and we have the capacity and the support, the ability to do that. Once again, that funding, that 1.9 million, is the pot of money which we believe is at risk in the next fiscal year of the federal budget. Trump did not support that, and although we are doing our best to convince the Congress to keep those funds in there, it is, as far as I'm concerned, really at risk and is likely to be a source of funds that might be cut. What I would say is that we will continue to keep you apprised of where that is heading and what we hear. But at this point, I would say that I would give it a 50-50 chance of it not being here for our organization and the other 4 organizations in the state come next federal year, starting October 1st. I'm going to stop there and be glad to answer questions or clarify all my quick mumblings and stuff that I just did. So,
Questions? Yes.
Sorry. So 1.9 feels like a drop in the bucket, in the sense that you're not going to build a whole lot of units with that. So I guess I'm trying to get a better sense of how your work that complements stuff like actually building. Like you said that you've gotten funding for, like, Champlain Housing gets other funding that help make turn the VFW into veteran housing and that kind of stuff. So you mentioned stuff like to mobilize during emergencies like floods and COVID. You mentioned, but you also mentioned, like, what was it, VHIP? I guess it would be helpful just to get, yeah, just like as we look to prioritize, like where we put our funds and where holes are going to start appearing, like where we have to stop up the bucket of flood of like when you would go without, and what and who would that affect? How do we step in, if at all possible?
Well, I appreciate that in the context of everything. It might seem it does seem like a smaller amount. I would say that the capital funds that we do receive are the most flexible funds, require very little in the way of regulatory requirements, and give us the flexibility to be able to move quickly. Many of the projects that we can do often, and this is true of all the other groups throughout the state, many the NAWRCS funds are usually could either be the first in to sort of be able to initiate a project, which could not happen, or the last funds in as a result to close a project. And very flexible capital funds really are sort of a critical part of the work we do as developers. But again, the capacity fund, that's the funds that are provided, are no small change, and they do provide our ability as organizations in every corner of the state to respond to issues when the state asks us to do something. We have the foundation and the resources to be able to respond. I would say that capacity fund, if that was to disappear, would severely impact many of the organizations within the network. All of us may find ourselves being able to do some of this, but we will wind up with losing a few $100,000 here, which is going to have an impact. And so it really disables us from being able to be a stronger partner to the state for the other capital funds that are necessary to move forward. our 5 nonprofits and the NeighborWorks organizations are the stronger nonprofits in the state, and as a result of the NeighborWorks funds. And once that is eliminated, it will have an impact.
Michael, one of the functions you perform, is you run what, 1,900 units, something like that?
With property management, yes.
Yeah. Is your core ability to continue doing that, number one, and number two, your staffing for other functions dependent on federal funds, and will they be compromised?
So the direct answer is property management, the buildings and the properties that we own, the rents cover the operating costs of those properties. That's broadly. If, however, major cuts continue to happen in vouchers and federal subsidies, the impacts could be pretty substantial to the residents, which will then impact the health of each of the properties and could have an impact then on CHG in a much bigger way. So we rely on, certainly we have folks who are receiving vouchers and support through the State Housing Authority or the Burlington Housing Authority, Winooski Housing Authority. And again, if those folks find themselves without vouchers, that will have an impact on their ability to pay rent. And we will find ourselves probably in very difficult conditions. Each property will suffer dramatically as a result of that. I would say that that's something we're actually monitoring right now. We watched through COVID some of the impacts that happened, and we already know that the Burlington Housing Authority has made some step backs. It has impacted certainly our ability to house homeless people, in that no new vouchers are being generated, and someone who is has very few resources on SSI or is disabled doesn't have the ability to get a voucher as easily as they used to, and as a result, many of the people who are homeless are stuck and not able to move forward and get permanent housing. Now we're still managing that within our properties with apartments which have subsidies directly connected to it. But certainly the notion that individuals who would either come to us or come to a private sector landlord with a voucher, those are not available. And that's going to have an impact overall. So we're selling a housing ecosystem. So I've been watching, we're watching that very closely as a direct impact in terms of how our properties will be impacted. We'll find ourselves with folks not able to pay their rent, which will impact our ability to manage and operate the properties, like any owner of a property.
Do you think, I'm just running through in my mind, Michael, your various functions. One of the functions, as I understand it, is that the way the VHIP program runs is the funds come from the state, but then you're allocated a certain amount of the funds, and you work with, what's that program called? That does the matches the homeless with
Sure.
no.
Coordinated entry?
Coordinated entry.
Coordinated entry,
You
yes.
work with coordinated entry and you pair up people with new units based on unit size and other factors. Assuming those programs continue to exist with state funds, will your ability to perform that function be impaired?
So I think we rely, there's very little funds that come to us that support those direct services to homeless people before they are housed in our properties. Much of what we do in terms of resident services, which support people staying housed within our properties, but also coming to our properties, comes through resources such as NeighborWorks, through philanthropy, through how we raise money, through other sources and other small grants that we might receive. So that it will impact us, and it will make it more difficult for us to have the flexibility to do that work, which we won't, simply will not be able to do that. Again, if we lose NeighborWorks funds, we're going to have to reduce our workforce in some way by a few folks, and that's likely not going to come from maintenance workers or property managers, but it's going to come from the people who are directly doing the kinds of programs like VHIP or resident services. Now, don't, when we get to our budget, we'll all look at that more carefully here at CHT. So I do want to say that we haven't done all that scenario planning just yet. Okay, we're hoping for something better, but we're going to begin to do that soon.
Yeah, I understand. Don't worry. We know that at this point it's very preliminary.
Yeah.
So we know that
Thanks
you're
for that.
speculating.
I appreciate that, Grace.
We know that.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing you say that the loss of the NeighborWorks funds, combined possibly with reduced Section 8 and other money, could put a strain on your organization that would require you to reduce staff.
Without a doubt, we will have our properties will suffer, and we will need to reduce staff as well. And just at a time when we probably need the staff to sort of support, sort of the organization overall to get through it. I would say this, both the vouchers, NeighborWorks, the CDS funds that we've relied on, and also certainly historically over the last handful of years, shall we say, during COVID, many of the projects that we have right now came from as a result of federal and state resources. And much of that is going away as well. So we're going to see less capacity to build and develop. We have a lot coming in to our pipeline right now, but just when the need is even greater, our ability to be able to develop will be hampered by again these things that I'm talking about. These programs, these reductions in program costs, reduction in program income from you all, but mostly from the federal government.
Is there any other function of yours? I was kind of running through the functions. What have I missed? Any other function that you perform that we should know about that either wouldn't be impacted or would?
So I think I'm looking at almost all of the things that we do, and I think it's really production that's going to be impacted, as well as services that's going to be impacted. I'm hoping that the Congress sees that they can't reduce the voucher program even more. If they do, it's going to be really dramatic impact, I think, throughout the state. Many very low income people who are disabled, seniors rely on that program for support. To me, that's the sort of the most direct impact. And that has nothing directly to do with us. It will impact us because we serve many of those people in our properties. And I think we have over 1,000 households who are in some kind of subsidy situation with either through the property or through direct subsidy. And that's a lot. And that's just us. So I think you certainly, I think you did speak to the State Housing Authority yesterday, I assume, and I could only imagine the impact that they're going to have in terms of reduction. We saw that immediately when the Burlington Housing Authority made its cuts. And we know that they are looking to reduce over 200 vouchers that are available in this region. That's about 10% of the vouchers over the next year or so. And that means that there's 200 households in Chittenden County or Burlington Center, principally, because they go outside Burlington, that are going to be impacted with no support for rents.
So if to play that unfortunate scenario out, just to make sure I understand, if one of your rental units loses their vouchers, that means they won't be able to pay the vouchers cover the difference between their ability to pay and market rent, correct?
That's right. Well, their ability to pay an affordable rent So even our properties are still $800 less than the market rent.
Right, that's the HUD market, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I think that impact, again, our operating costs for a property goes to maintenance, management, finance, insurance, taxes, utilities. And so by the time you're done, someone living on SSI with $1,000 or $1,200 a month can only afford $300, while cost to operate are $700 to $800 a month at a minimum, depending upon the property. So there's a loss to us, and that impacts our properties directly.
So you could literally be put into a money losing situation.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I could tell you that we spent time in our finance committee on our board just looking at that as a in terms of our properties, in terms of how we're managing sort of what we see as increasing receivables. Receivables meaning people who are not able to pay rent even now at post-COVID. And that's something that at our that when we manage our properties, we sort of look at sort of those financials and how we're doing. Overall, we're in good health. Let me just say this: I don't want to create an image that everything is terrible here at CHT. It's not. We're doing pretty well, but I do know that if the vouchers continue to reduce, that it'll impact people, and then people will not be able to pay, and then it'll ultimately impact sort of the business of affordable housing, as well as other landlords who use and support people who are on vouchers.
Yes.
Michael, so, we heard about this sort of three-legged stool of like helping people with services, helping people afford rent, and then producing actual units of housing, right? For Vermont's sort of housing crisis response or whatnot. It seems to me that if there are cuts that are beyond our control, I mean, for me, the logic is keep people who are in homes in their home, keep people in their homes. And so like you keep talking about the vouchers, and I just want to make sure that, am I understanding that that would be a massive priority? Like you're not going to be able to help people afford rent so why build more units? If you had flexibility in spending.
Yeah. So
right, if there are cuts to everything and we have only a few state dollars, does it make sense to keep all three legs of the stool, or does it make sense to really focus more on one priority?
Well,
And Tom's looking at me like, I don't know.
So I don't it's hard to answer the question. It's not necessarily just a Sophie's choice. It's a little bit more complex than that. Within our properties, the other, a good number of our folks are working and can afford the affordable rent. And if we don't produce that, they're not going to be able to afford any rent at all, and it's not going to get any better from the vast majority of what I would say call moderate income people. I'm talking about a very distinct class of folks who are very low income, who may find themselves without vouchers. But if we don't build additional housing that is going to meet the middle class or the moderate income folks, we're never going to be able to sort of move the whole system housing into a better place. So I would not say do one and not the other. I just couldn't possibly do that. I'm not in your position where I had to make those choices either. So I appreciate the difficult choice you might have to make. But if we don't produce more rents that are affordable to people at 60%, 80% of median income here and throughout the state of Vermont, your working people will not be able to afford to live here or rent anymore. And that they are not voucher holders. And so I would say to you that it's essential for us to continue to build housing for that class of people.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
other questions by the committee?
Thank you for the time.
Everybody's depressed into silence.
My apologies. I am the most hopeful person in the world. I wouldn't develop housing or think about developing any housing if I wasn't hopeful and thought about what could possibly be. And we will continue to, let me just say, our commitment here is to continue to work with other NeighborWorks organizations throughout the country who have delegations who may not be as sympathetic to NeighborWorks initially, to get them to make sure that we have a yes vote. So this becomes then what has been a stable source of funding for the state of Vermont now for a couple of decades, will continue to be. And you won't have to work on this one. You'll maybe have other issues to manage, but not this one in particular. But I didn't want to alert you to it. I came back a little somber, not necessarily depressed, but somber about the resource in the future. But again, we are working with our delegation about how to move the votes, because we just need a handful of votes here or there to get this right. And I do think it is a program that is supported in both red states, red districts, and purple districts throughout the country. And that's the work that we're doing right now, is to make sure that that does get that support in other parts of the country. Our delegation is just, super and all this.
So our delegation is working with others.
Our delegation is asking us questions about how they can be helpful. Peter Welch has introduced Dear Colleague letter. He's a lead in the Dear Colleague letter, asking other senators to sign on. And he has been talking to other members of other states. And Peter's history has been someone who's reached across the aisle to get support. And Becca's actually working with us also closely with on identifying other House members who she could talk to talk about the importance of this resource. So they're doing solid work on our behalf.
Great. Any final questions of Michael?
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I can't stop. Sorry, Michael. So I'm on the NeighborWorks website, and I clicked onto the impact on your state. And there's a wonderful graphic that shows that for the $1,887,450 that we get in NeighborWorks dollars, so that's the 1.9 you're referring to, right?
Yes, yeah.
That we get grants leverage 32 to 1. So that 1.9 turns into $61 million.
Yes.
Does that look a lot? Does that ratio get a lot smaller? Will those, if we were to do the same, if we were to fill that with state dollars, the 1.9, are you going to be able to leverage? I'm just trying to get more of a picture of
So those leverage dollars turned out to be principally tax credit dollars, also Vermont Housing Conservation Board dollars, likely some state tax credit dollars coming through Vermont Housing Finance Agency for, either shared equity home ownership or something else, mobile home program potentially. So those are looking at all. They're looking at all the projects, and we report to them quarterly on everything we do, and that information is generated from them that indicates what the leverage is. So they're looking at essentially all of our development pro formas. And so we have, probably a $500,000 into a project in Shelburne, and we might have a total of $22 million in there, and from a variety of from 17 other sources of funds. And those 17 other sources of funds are what they're talking about. Biggest chunk being tax credits, probably federal tax credits, which at this point, I think we're feeling, well, in all the world of everything, we think tax credits are going to be supported. So that's the biggest source of leverage. But those tax credits, remember, state tax credits, those 9% are few and far between, and you still need a third of resources. Typically, they only do about 2/3 in development. There still needs another third from other sources in order to make that work. That's where NeighborWorks come in. If you're doing 4% tax credit, you need 2/3 more money from other sources. Some of these sources, some of these leverages also simply might be mortgage, and it's not mortgage, right, but bank financing as well. We're able to do some bank financing here in Chittenden County. So it's just all the other leverage sources, and it's a wide variety of them.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that's helpful.
Michael, thank you so much
Sure.
for your time. I know how busy you are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know, thank you for all the work, and hope we all get through this.
One way or another, we'll get through it.
Thank you.
What shape, I'm not sure. Okay, well, thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, that takes care of our agenda for today. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we're going to start right at 9. We're going to have 7 witnesses. What we're doing is we're just starting on the Senate housing bill. And this won't be our only testimony, but it'll be a significant part of it. At the moment, we'll have lunch, the House floor. We don't have anything. Do we have anything after the House floor at this point?
No.
And I think that it's not clear it will be a short floor, yeah.
I believe the education.
Yeah, so I don't think the floor will be short. Yeah, I think that's wise. We'll see what Betsy Ann says, but it's given that it's not just the housing bill, it's not just the ed bill. Because even if it was just the ed bill, it's long because you got to have reports from the, appropriations, a report from Ways and Means, etc. But if it was just debate and up and down, that might not take too long, but there's an amendment also at least.
2 amendments.
2.
But the bill itself is not that long.
But it is what I'm saying. Well, no one's going to read it, but we're going to go through it.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I meant
It's over 100 pages.
Yeah.
The ed bill.
not, the ed bill is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's over 100
It's this whole book.
Yeah.
I guess I was just reading the ed part of the ed bill.
It's a long bill.
36, I
It's, in fact, yeah, it's long. So anyway, I think the chances are it's going to be a fairly long floor and we will not hold hearings afterwards. But our goal is to get well into the Senate bill, housing bill tomorrow, and then also on Friday. So that's where we're headed. Okay. And I hope no one's bored yet. I don't know, some of us find it easy to be bored, but I'm not. Anyway,